reality of it is the restaurant industry is in massive trouble right now. It's been slowly building over the last few years, but this year, even the last few weeks, have really created a ton of urgency in the market that really didn't exist before this.
Welcome to the Block and Tackle Show, hosted by Karl Block. Karl is a partner in the law firm of Loeb and Loeb here in Los Angeles, California. He'll be tackling some of the biggest issues in business today. Welcome to the show.
Did you know one of the biggest industry disruptions that's happening right now? It's AI-powered robots in restaurants. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's already here working in major fast food chains. Restaurants are turning to AI and automation to solve labor shortages, cut costs, and stay competitive in a rapidly changing industry. So what does this mean for restaurant owners, employees, and the future of work? Will AI replace human workers entirely? Before we get into it, I'm Karl Block, host of the Block and Tackle Show, and I'm joined by Richard Hull, CEO of Miso Robotics, the company behind Flippy and much more, the AI-powered robot already making waves in the restaurant industry. Rich, welcome to the Block and Tackle Show.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
Well, thank you for being here. So there probably are a few people who do not know what Miso Robotics is. So you seem to be an preeminent AI robot powered auxiliary or complement to, for now, at least the fast food industry and maybe more. So why don't you talk to us about the newest version of Flippy and tell us what it's doing, how it's different from the first version of Flippy, and why this is an amazing product for people in the food service industry.
Well, I'll do two things. I'll give you the Flippy update, but I'll also tell you a little bit about Miso just so that everybody's got some good context here. So Miso has been around for 9 years and it largely created the restaurant technology space. The whole space has really only been around for less than a decade. And Miso was one of the first movers, if not the first mover in that space. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, after a lot of R&D, they launched a burger flipping robot named Flippy. And what they realized, though, very quickly is that the more interesting opportunity was right next door at the fry station. And part of that was just big addressable market. You know, the fry station automation in the US alone is a $4 or $5 billion revenue opportunity, but also the grill is operated differently at every different restaurant and the fry station is operated exactly the same. So while what we do is complex, it's easier and more replicatable than doing the grill. And so they stopped doing the grill. They started doing fry stations. When they did that, they tried to change the name to something that was fry related away from Flippy. But by that point, Flippy had all these Instagram fan clubs and a lot of brand equity. And so it just kind of stuck. And so it was brought into the company about a year and a half ago. And I was brought in by Ecolab, which had made an investment in Miso about 2 years ago. Ecolab, for those who don't know, is a $70 billion public company. They sell cleaning solutions to probably every restaurant you've ever been in. When they got in, they realized that the company was just teetering right on hyper growth mode, kind of like that next phase of many technology businesses. And so doing that is a very different skill set than starting a company. And so the founders here did something incredible. They created something from nothing, which is amazing in any space, much less technology, but really sort of hyper growing a company in that phase is just something you kind of have had to have done before. That's what they brought me in for. I was just leaving my last company, which is called VIX, which is the world's largest Spanish language streaming service. So I had been one of the founders of the VIX streaming service. We sold that to Univision, which is the world's biggest Spanish language media company. And as much as I wanted them to fire me when they acquired us, they didn't see it that way. So I stayed for 2 years and left and came here to grow this company. And that seems like a weird transition maybe for some people. On the surface, it sounds like a content business, and there's surely some truth to that. But in reality, it's really a technology and a distribution business. So we built the tech stack from scratch that you need to stream video at scale with 1 million or 2 million or 10 million concurrent streams. And that's not for the faint of heart. It's very complex. And then we distribute that through kind of tier one partners, whether they be Apple to your iPhone or Comcast or whomever else, right? And so that's actually what Miso does. They build a technology product and they distribute it. I was aware of the company because I had spent a couple of years, a decade ago, as a venture capitalist and had run a fund. And Miso was one of those investments that we made as part of a vertical that we invested in, which is called Frontier Technology. So it was anything massively disruptive that was either going to be a grand slam home run or go straight to zeros. At the higher end of that, companies like SpaceX, but Miso was more at the startup end. So I had kind of a passive view of the company over the however many years, and they knew me, I knew them. When Ecolab came in and said, hey, I think we need to really scale this thing, and we were willing to put those type of resources and support behind it, that's how I got into this job. Now, back to your original question, but what we spent the last year doing really is redesigning the new generation of Flippy. So I had to bring in a little bit more experience on our engineering team, fix a few things that were not scalable. So tech support and some other kind of pillars that you really need to scale this type of business. And then we spent the better part of last year using all of those to develop the new generation of the Flippy Fry Station robot. That turned out to be great. And the new generation of Flippy is everything that the restaurant operators want it to be, partially because they participated with us in doing all of that design and development work on the new generation of Flippy. Now he's half the size, twice as fast, far more reliable, costs less to manufacture, installs in just a few hours overnight, whereas it used to take a couple days. That's a big deal breaker for restaurants. As we've rolled that out, we're now actually starting to fulfill the promise that I was brought here to do, which is to really kind of scale the deployment of those Flippies. And it couldn't come at a better time, because the reality of it is the restaurant industry is in massive trouble right now. It's been slowly building over the last few years, but this year, even the last few weeks, have really created a ton of urgency in the market that really didn't exist before this. And if you recall, during the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about how restaurants were having a hard time finding workers to work in kitchens. And everybody thought that was a temporary phenomenon, that it would come back once the pandemic ended. But in reality, it just accelerated something that was already happening, and it's permanent. Last year, our friends at the state of California jacked up the minimum wage in restaurants to $20 an hour. So that caused a lot of chaos. And then this year, you've got immigration crackdowns and tariffs. Literally, just in the last few weeks, you've probably seen videos that I've seen floating around of everything from the Walmart stockroom to restaurant kitchens. And they're a ghost town. The data says that 40% of the people that work in restaurant kitchens in the US are undocumented, and they're not showing up at work. Similarly, tariffs are a big deal too. We don't really know how that's going to work out yet, but if you've got to pay 25% more for your avocados from Mexico, that's a really bad place to be if you're a restaurant. And you can literally Google this, because I didn't believe it when I first saw the stat, but it's true. 86% of the frozen French fries that are sold in America come from Canada. If you're putting tariffs on Canadian stuff, it's going to really impact the restaurant business. So there's a lot of urgency to automate. Restaurant kitchens have operated the same way for 50 years. They innovated the front of the house probably 15 years ago or so with open table and online reservations and point of sale systems. But the president of Open Table, the former president of Open Table, sits on our board, so he talks about that moment. But back of the house, their kitchens have operated the same way for decades. And so now they're being forced to automate. And that's what we do. We deliver that automation. That's really our mission, is to automate the least desirable, hardest to fill jobs in a commercial kitchen. So you can just take that off the table, because it's hard to hire those people. Nobody wants to work at the fry station, believe me. Like, nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to burn my arms today and smell like grease and slip and fall. And it's not a very high value job. There are high value jobs that you're willing to pay that $20 an hour minimum wage to. And that could be washing dishes. It could be front of the house doing upsells. So that's what we do. That's the mission of Miso. So that's the short version of a long story.
So if I heard you correctly, you came in when Flippy was already out there. You came in based upon Ecolab saying, we really need to figure out how to scale this up. And you figured out in less than 2 years how to take this company, scale it up, and come up with a better Flippy, easier to install, more functionality. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you have a strategic investor who understands a lot about the food industry, since they're selling cleaners, solvents, whatever to the food industry. And they say, Rich Hall's our guy. He's the guy we think that can take this to the next level. And now, less than 2 years later, you've got Flippy 2.0.
Yeah, I think we've done exactly that. And it's a lot of things. And the biggest one is reliability. Innovation is messy. Luckily, I'm a guy that likes messy, but you have to be able to create automation that's reliable enough to build a business around. And you can't have your robot going down at the lunch rush and leave you paralyzed. These are the stages that innovation goes through, right? You start with prototypes, then you go into pilots, then you go into kind of first and second and third generation, and then you really create this truly kind of hyper scalable product. And if you think about it, like look at some of the companies that seem like they just got here overnight, but actually had been here a long time. Waymo, perfect one, like drove by a Waymo car this morning. But Waymo was started in 2009. They spent the first dozen years literally just iterating and iterating on their innovation. They only officially launched in 2023 in San Francisco. And today, less than 2 years later, that iteration and work and R&D paid off. They own a quarter of the rideshare market in San Francisco. And now they've rolled out to our town here in LA and so forth. So that's the cycle of innovation.
And yours was pretty fast. Is there anything that Flippy 2.0 cannot do at a fry station, or is it complete?
He can cook anything that a human could cook at the fry station, including tacos. One of our clients is Jack in the Box. They sell a lot of tacos. And so we had to teach Flippy how to cook tacos, and he does it really well.
I mean, that's obviously incredible. You suggested without saying it, I think, but you probably are the industry leader in food service automation, aren't you?
We are. We're also the first mover, which is good and bad. In some respects, I'd rather be the fast follower and just let somebody else make all the mistakes and we'll just copy all the good stuff that they do. But the flip side of that is that by being out there at the tip of the spear and being that first mover, yeah, you got to make some mistakes. And that's part of our company values, which is that mistakes are okay as long as you learn from them. But you also gather all this data and all these learnings and all this knowledge that nobody else gets. We've gathered more data than anyone on the planet about how AI and robots operate in commercial kitchens. Nobody has even close to what we have. And so then that allows us to create patents. We have almost 30 patents that protect all of this innovation that we do here. And it allows us to build data sets that we use to train up our AI models that really power Flippy. And there's a lot of value to that data outside of our industry as well. And so while we're not monetizing that yet, we will. And so being that first mover and, kind of the leader in the space, it comes with a lot of benefits as well.
Are you comfortable sharing what those other uses or industries your data set would be allowed?
Yeah, insurance, real estate, traders, and hedge funds. There's all kinds of different use cases for that. But if you're a real estate guy and you're trying to convince fast food brands of where they need to locate their restaurant in order to drive the most sales, there's not many places you can go to get that data. Like we have that data. If you're a hedge fund trader and you want to short a stock or go long on a stock, like you want as much information as you can. Like there's insurance business, right? The workers' comp rates, you want to build workers' comp packages that don't include fry station workers in our case, right? Because we've automated that. We've taken that off the table. Like there's all kinds of different industry use cases outside of the restaurant business that you can come up with. And I'm sure that just scratches the surface. We've done some work to kind of think through what those are, but we are not yet to the point where we've gone out and started to monetize this.
I would say to you that in my experience, there's not a lot of businesses in product development that can naturally say, hey, the data that we're accumulating can be useful in other industries and how to do it. So that's actually quite impressive to me.
Well, I think our patents are the same way. While we may end up in the future licensing some of our patented technology to people in the restaurant space, there's some of our patents that apply outside of the restaurant space as well. Anybody that is, got a robot arm and is making decisions about what to do with that robot arm very well may be treading into our patent territory. And so we want to be in a place to be able to go out and license some of those patents outside of our industry as well.
Okay, so you basically listed a litany of reasons why people should have Flippy 2.0, and we'll talk maybe about whether there's a 3.0 and stuff. And I think I got most of them, but it seems like tariffs or not, some of the biggest things are maybe the most hazardous positions for humans to work in a fast food business. I mean, taking an order, causing an accident or things like that, picking them up after they're packaged and handing them to the customer doesn't seem like an incredibly high risk job. So I totally get how it's not the most optimal job. And I can understand why, because of the nature of the fast food industry, you're not going to expect typically a tremendous amount of longevity in those jobs. So it makes sense that at some point you say, why are we going to keep doing this? Immigration or not, I mean, I'm sure even in other countries that have fast food restaurants, I'm sure that those jobs aren't the most desirable jobs. Just seems like part of the position. In terms of productivity, I would assume because Flippy has the knowledge and is precise, there's less waste. Flippy doesn't need to take a meal break, a rest period, things like that. Doesn't have to go to the bathroom. Flippy doesn't have to take a day off because it's sick or it needs to go to a wedding or a graduation or something like that. So you have inherent reliability. You don't have to worry about workers' comp issues or, healthcare issues. Those seem like to be incredibly compelling reasons why in a business that typically doesn't pay the highest dollar and is the highest margin, and that you have this product that gives these restaurants stability. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, the average person at a fry station job lasts about 90 days. And so it costs you just under $6,000 as a restaurant operator to go out and source a new person to do that job. By the time you source them, onboard them, train them. And it's this just recurring treadmill where restaurants are just constantly replacing. I mean, overall, they're replacing 150% of their workers every year, but the fry station guy is like the biggest offender in that. So it's just a giant sign from the universe that this is a great place to automate. And there's other things that can be automated in the kitchen as well. But this one is a real low-hanging fruit opportunity.
Now that makes sense. Speaking of other places, since you basically are the thought leaders and the industry leaders in this stuff, what do you think is next in the pipeline for you? And where do you think this ultimately goes?
Well, over the years, the company has announced different products before I got here. There's a drink making robot named Sippy and a coffee robot named Drippy and a tortilla chip robot called Chippy. So you get the gist of how names take shape here. And what I did when I came in is said, look, let's really focus on the biggest revenue opportunity that we have and let's tighten our focus. And I took everything that wasn't named Flippy and I put them into our Miso Innovation Lab. So that's a new effort that we've got. It's a new space that we have. And we continue to iterate on those products, but at a much slower, more cost-effective pace. And when they're ready, we can roll them out. The Miso Innovation Lab is also the place where we partner with big corporate restaurant brands that have a very specific problem that they want to solve. And so they come to us and they say, here's what I'm trying to do. And then we work out an arrangement where we'll co-finance it. They'll pay some, we'll pay some, we'll co-own it. It's our sandbox. It's where we experiment, it's where we make mistakes. And so that's something we don't spend a lot of time talking about, but it really drives our future growth from a product portfolio standpoint. The biggest, though, if you want to look, 2 steps down the road at our future, I wasn't really brought here to build the Flippy business. I was brought here to build something bigger. And the North Star for us is the kitchen operating system of the future that just doesn't exist today. And, I presented at a conference a couple months ago, and all the big restaurant brands who are publicly traded were there presenting as well. And if you listen to those presentations from those CEOs, they all said the same thing. They said, I want to run my restaurant with fewer workers who I pay more so they have a better quality of life, which means they stay longer. They're working in high value jobs because I'm paying them more. And anything that can be automated, I just want to run it from an app. Well, that's basically what we're building. Flippy's a giant data gathering machine. Any connected device is. And so if you can use AI to take all that data and translate into kind of real world actions in real time, like that's the holy grail. And that's ultimately the North Star of what we're building.
Sounds amazing. But for example, like restaurants that have silverware, glasses, dishes, could all that be AI, robotic, automated?
It can. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the dishwashing machine is kind of a robot.
Yeah.
But the hard part about all of that is actually not washing the dishes. The hard part is scraping all the stuff off of the dishes, then getting it stacked in a way that the dishwashing machine can actually, clean it, and then getting it unstacked when the dishes are done and putting it into kind of the appropriate place. Those are things that today humans have to do, even if the actual washing is done by a machine. And so there are companies out there that are starting to try to automate that. Our partners at Ecolab, who probably sell more dishwashers than anybody in the US to restaurants and commercial kitchens, have spent a bunch of time with us talking about how we could automate the kind of the inputs and the outputs of the dishwashing machine. And so that's something we'll look at. We've spent some time looking at it. We're going to look some more at it. There's a lot of stuff like that you can automate in these kitchens.
If you want more info on the show, please visit blockandtackleshow.com. And you can also email me at carl@blockandtackleshow.com. Thanks for tuning in.